MashaAllah. Huh? Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar. Yo, yo, yo. You want your stuff?
I was eating my pizza.
I was eating your pizza. I'm not my coffee.
What's that?
Coffee.
What's this got?
Class. You know, sit down next to me.
Yeah, right there.
That's you. Go sit right there. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ما بعد. Tonight we're going to start the book of Salat, Kitab al-Salat. And before we start the actual book, we got to go through a couple terms that's necessary in order to understand everything we're going to be learning. Firstly, there's going to be some terms used that not just for when it comes to the salat, but outside of the salat also, these words are going to keep coming up. And they have to do with what we call in Islam the hukm, the ruling on something. As everything we do has a ruling connected to it. Meaning maybe something is halal or something is haram, something is recommended, something is disliked, like this, something is valid, something is invalid. These terms are going to come up over and over and over and over again. All right, so before we start, we got to make sure we know what we're talking about. What does that mean to a Muslim when we hear these words? So we know the word, for example, if we say something is obligatory, something is wajib, right? Does anybody know what does wajib or obligatory? If we say the salat is obligatory, what does that mean? Number one, listen, y'all, everybody. Don't be shy to get a question wrong. Don't be shy to say you don't know. If one person doesn't know, then there's probably 5 or 6 more other people who don't know. They just don't want to say they don't know. There's no shyness in learning. So if we say something is obligatory, it means what? Huh? Better? Bad? Not bad, huh? You have to do it. If something is obligatory, that means you have to do it. Right? But Islamically, it's a little more than that. In Islam, if something is obligatory, like the salat, yes, it means you have to do it. And on top of that, huh?
If you don't do it, you're deserving of Allah's punishment and you're sinful.
It's a sin not to do that thing. And a person who doesn't do that thing deserves to be punished. It's a punishable act that Allah will punish him for it. Okay? So for example, the salat is obligatory. Therefore, the person who doesn't pray, number one, is a sinful. It's a sin. It's a bad deed on their record, number one. On top of that, not praying is punishable. That a person can be punished by Allah on the day of judgment. Clear? Now, the opposite, or not say the opposite, something a little less than that, if we say something is sunnah. Sunnah, or sometimes it says recommended. Like if something is recommended, that means that if a person doesn't do it, then it's not a sin. It's not a sin not to do it. Of course, we should try to do everything that is from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But if a person did not do that thing, it doesn't mean that they are sinful, number one, and it doesn't mean necessarily that they deserve to be punished, number two. Clear? طيب. After that, we have al-hurma, something that is haram, as we say. Does anybody know what haram? What is haram? Huh? That's bad. A little more than that. Haram is bad. We know if you do something haram, that means you did something that's bad. What else is haram? Huh? It's not permissible. You can't do it. What else? Huh? It's what? It's a punishable act. Meaning, if you do that thing that is haram, Allah will punish you for it. If Allah chooses, He'll punish you for it. It's a punishable action. It's a sin to do it, and it's punishable. So, for example, eating pork. Eating pork is a sin. It's a sin, and it's punishable. Okay? طيب. After that, we have what's called makruh, which is something that is disliked. It's not haram, but it's disliked to do it. You shouldn't do it. So if a person does something that is disliked, it doesn't mean that it's a sin, and it doesn't mean that it is punishable. But a person should still stay away from it. Clear? Now we get ready to get to 2, because the first sentence in the chapter is going to have one of these words connected to it. We also have something that is mubah. It's open. You have the choice to do it or don't do it. There's no sin connected to it, right? And there's no reward connected to it. Then we have 2 more terms. One of them is as-sihha. If something is valid, and butlan. And butlan, something is not valid. Okay? You got to know these words because they're going to keep coming up over and over and over and over again. And if you don't know the term and just keep passing by like, you know, it's just a word there you don't know, you're going to have some misunderstandings. Clear? Everybody with me? طيب. قال رحمه الله. The author says, Kitab al-Salat, the book of the Salat. Do we all know what Salat is, number one? Who doesn't know what Salat? If you don't know what Salat is, raise your hand. Kitab al-Salat. Salat has 2 meanings. One meaning is a general meaning, and another meaning is more specific. A very specific, accurate meaning. And this is the meaning that we're talking about today. That there's nothing that is just haphazard in Islam. Nothing is just haphazard. Everything is very specific. So it's important to understand the specifics so that we don't confuse one thing with something else. We thought it was this, but that's not really the situation. طيب. The Salat is considered specific statements, because we know when we stand for the Salat, there's certain things we have to say. Right? There's specific things we have to say, specific things we have to do. Clear? You don't just stand in the Salat and just say what you feel like you're saying. There's certain things that have to be said when we stand to pray. And if you don't say certain things, it's going to affect the rest of your prayer. Some things, if you don't say them, the whole Salat, as we say, is out the window. It's not going to count. All right? So the specific things that have to be said, and there's specific actions that have to be done. Everybody with me? Like the first word is going to go back to one of those 5 words. تجب. تجب الخمس على كل مسلم مكلف. The 5 prayers are obligatory. Right? Obligatory. Everybody see that board over there? It's 5. It's 5. There's 6 prayers on there, but it's 5 of them numbered. Right? 5 prayers are obligatory. Meaning, based on the definition, that means what? Huh? What is the translation? Based on the Islamic definition, those 5 prayers are obligatory. Meaning, If you don't do them, it's a sin. And number two, it's punishable. Not praying that a person be punished on Qiyamah. And this is a big issue here. The Salat is a huge issue. A very big issue. Tayyib, as the Salat, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the first thing that we're all going to be asked about from our actions, Yawm al-Qiyamah, is the Salat. The first thing on Yawm al-Qiyamah, when we have to stand in front of Allah and be judged for everything we did from our actions, is the Salat. Clear? So, it's not something light. So the obligation is to pray all five. Tayyib? All five. For who? Every Muslim. Not some of the Muslims. Tajib, obligatory, doesn't mean optional. The five prayers are not an option. If I get to them, I get to them. I'm a little tired of today, I can't pray. No. Obligatory. You have to do them, and if not, it's a sin, number one, and Allah will punish you, number two. So these five prayers are not optional prayers. They're obligatory on who? Every Muslim, number one. You need to know these three people. There's three characteristics, three descriptions of the people who the Salat is obligatory on. Number one, you got to be Muslim. The Salat is obligatory on the Muslim, which means it's not obligatory on who? The non-Muslim. Which means if a non-Muslim accepted Islam tomorrow or tonight, that don't mean they got to go back and make up prayers for the past 20 or 15 years that they wasn't praying. All right? Obligatory on the Muslim, number one, mukallaf. The mukallaf, the word mukallaf carries two meanings. Number one, come on, Sheikh. Huh? Nah. That they have their intellect, they're sound, they have a sound mind, and that's something different. We're going to do that. But intellect is only one. Every Muslim that has a sound mind,
responsible. You're responsible.
Every Muslim that's not mentally challenged, right? They have a sound mind, has to pray all five every day.
Of age.
Huh?
Of age.
What is of age?
Over 7.
Huh?
Puberty.
Puberty. We're going to get to that. Discernment and puberty are not the same. All right? Every Muslim. If you're Muslim, you have a sound mind. As you say, you're not crazy. You're not mentally challenged. You don't have any mental instabilities. Okay? And you reach the age of puberty, that means the Salat is obligatory, not an option.
So under puberty, you don't have to do all of them?
Good question. So that means if you haven't reached puberty yet, what does that mean?
It's not obligatory?
It's not obligatory. And if it's not obligatory, that means the one that didn't reach puberty, if they don't pray, then they're not what? They're not sinful, and it's not punishable. Does that mean that the ones that haven't reached puberty shouldn't pray? No, it don't mean that. It doesn't mean that if the kids haven't reached puberty, they shouldn't pray. But the reality is puberty makes the Salat obligatory. The people who haven't reached puberty, the children who haven't reached puberty, the Salat is not obligatory on them yet. That doesn't mean we shouldn't teach the kids to pray and encourage them to pray and go to the masjid and pray and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that. We're talking about the hukum, the ruling, is that in order for the Salat to be obligatory, meaning a person doesn't pray, they're sinful and it's punishable by Allah on the Day of Judgment, they have to reach puberty and they have to have a sound mind. That's three things. Muslim, they reach puberty, and they have their sanity. They're not mentally challenged, they don't have any problems. Which means if a person does have a mental problem, can they pray? It's not obligatory. Clear? Obligatory. What makes it obligatory? Those three things make it obligatory on that person. So everybody, you look at yourself, you reach puberty, I'm Muslim, I reach puberty, I have my sanity. The five are obligatory, not optional. If I get to them, I get to them. If I don't, I don't. I gotta work a long shift today, so when I get home, if I feel like it, I'm gonna pray. If I'm too tired, I'll just start praying. No. Yes?
So for the one who is of a certain age, who has reached puberty, or the one who is mentally defect, it still counts as reward for them if they do pray?
We're gonna get to that, inshallah. طيب. We clear on the three people that gotta pray? Muslim, reach puberty, and they have their sound state of mind. It's two people that are from that category that are excluded. It's two people, they're Muslim, they have their sanity, and they have a sound mind. What else? They reach puberty, but they don't have to pray. Who are they? The woman on her menses, even if she reached puberty, right? She has a sound mind, and she doesn't, and all of that. She doesn't have to pray because she's on her menses. And who else? New Muslims have to pray. New Muslims still have to pray. The woman on her menses doesn't have to pray. And who else? Postpartum. The woman who just had a baby, when a woman just has a baby, she doesn't have to pray for that period of 40 days while the postpartum blood is still being discharged. Clear? So some Muslims have an excuse of not praying 5 times a day. But for all of the brothers in here, none of us get that excuse. None of the brothers get that excuse. None of the men get the excuse of not praying 5 times a day at no time in our lives. Until we die, till Allah calls us back, we have to pray every day 5 times a day. When the days are long in the summer, and when the days are short in the winter. If we're sick, it's a way to pray when you're sick. If you're traveling, it's a way to pray when you're traveling. If you can't get on the ground, it's a way to pray in the chair. There is no time where we just don't pray. Clear? طيب. The next word, ولا تصح من مجنون ولا صغير غير مميز. You got a question?
Like, what if you're, like, the people who pass puberty, like, what if they're working and they can't pray right then? Like, when it's time?
Good question. The people who it's obligatory to pray, they reach puberty, they have their sanity, they're Muslim, and they're at work, and it's time to pray, but they can't pray. It's important to know the times of the Salat. The Salat is not a 10-minute thing. Most of the Salat, depending on what time of the year, you have a window. For example, you got from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock to pray that prayer. You can't pray at 1, you can't pray at 1:30, you can't pray at 2. You have all the way up until a certain time to pray that prayer. And those times we'll get into when we get into the conditions for the Salat. All right, we'll go a little more into that when we get to the times, the conditions of the Salat. Each Salat has a specific time that it has to be prayed in. Okay? It doesn't mean when the adhan is called that you have to pray immediately. If you're able to, that's the best thing, that's good. If you can't, then you have time. That the time is stretched. There's a amount of time you have to pray for each Salat. We'll get into more of that when we get to the times of the Salat. طيب, if the person who does not have their sanity, if they do pray, the person who's not mentally stable, they have a mental condition, if they pray, then that Salat is not valid, even if they did pray. Clear? لا تصح. يا شيخ؟ لا تصح.
Wait, what if they have only a little bit of mental health?
It depends. We talking about the person, and we get into that as the mental health or the mental thing in itself could vary from person to person. We're talking about people who we would consider, I don't want to use that type of word, but say that, intellectually disabled. They've been classified as being intellectually disabled, okay? Not everybody that we consider to be intellectually disabled, maybe they're not, okay? That takes a diagnosis from a doctor. Not everybody we see walking down the street acting funny, we say they're crazy, and not Islamically. Not Islamically. That takes a diagnosis from a doctor. So the person who has been diagnosed to that state, then if they did pray that that is not valid from them because they are not able to, they don't have the capacity to form an intention for the prayer. And from the conditions to pray is that you have to have an intention for every salat. For every salat, you have to have the intention in your heart for what salat you're going to pray. And the person who's not able to do this, they're not able to fulfill that condition. So even if they did pray, then it would not be valid. Also, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the pen is lifted. The people, the intellectually disabled, that the pen has been lifted. They're not accountable for what they're doing. They don't know. So if they did something haram, right? If they did something that they were not supposed to do, right? With Allah, there's no sin as they're not, right? They're not capable of understanding what they're doing. It doesn't mean it's okay to let them go and do anything and harm people. It doesn't mean that. We're talking about what is the ruling. If they did something, what would be the ruling? Okay? Something.
In that case, is the opposite true? If they do something that's correct and they mentally challenge, is it understood, or is the ruling support that they would be rewarded?
If they did something?
Good. If they've done something correct. Because you just said, or maybe I heard you wrong, if they do something incorrect, they won't be faulted for that.
The pen is lifted.
Right.
Meaning,
Both ways.
Both ways. The sin is not on them if they do something haram. The sin is not on them. Basically, they're not held responsible, accountable for what they did.
So you know how, like, say, for example, a child makes umrah,
Mm.
and then below the age of puberty, they might get rewarded for it, even though it's not counted for them to elect it. Maybe the question is, if you have a person that has a mental health problem, and they do something that's rewardable, do they get the reward for it? Maybe that's the question.
Is that the question? Not without a niyyah. Not without a niyyah. They don't have the ability to form an intention. There is no worship without an intention.
So with the kid, do they still count?
We can get there.
So basically, it's levels of that mental disability.
Yes, there's levels of that mental disability. Yes.
What if, like, you have, no capability of, finding out, like, what time it is?
If you have,
He went back to the question about the work thing.
oh, if you have work,
It was like, what if you, don't know what time it is and it's time to pray?
Mumtaz. If you don't know what time it is and it's time to pray. Do we have an excuse for not knowing what time of prayer it is in 2019? Why not?
Cell phone.
Cell phones, applications.
No, what if, like, you're in, like, somewhere else, like, a foreign country or something?
If you're in a situation where there is no way of telling what time to pray, we're going to get to that when we get to the times of the Salat. Because we're going to go through, inshallah, and learn how to determine what time it is for the prayer without the phone. Because he's right, you get in a situation, you can't take your phone with you. The phone dies. How are you going to know when it's time to pray and when it's not time to pray? Inshallah. Tayyib. So the person who has the intellectual disability, if they prayed, is not valid due to the fact they don't have an intention. Also, the second person, even if they did pray, it's not valid, is the Saghir Ghayr Mumayyiz, the one who hasn't reached the age of discernment, which is you got two people or two categories of the people who have not reached puberty. The children who haven't reached puberty are in two categories. Everybody with me? The children who have not reached puberty are in two categories. The first category is from the age up to the age of 7. The second category is after 7 up until they reach puberty, which could be 15 years old. Let's just use 15. All right? So the first group, which is up until the age of 7, they're considered to be the people who have not reached the age of discernment. They can't really determine what's correct, what's incorrect. They're considered the younger of those who haven't reached puberty, which means that they're like, not meaning their mental, the level of their mental, they're not able to bring about the intention for what they're doing. That could vary. Some of the scholars say it could happen a little before that, could happen a little after that. But some say the age of 7 years old. So the person was from the age up to the age of 7, he or she is in one category. After 7, until they reach puberty, that's another category. The one who is 7 and under, if they do something, an act of worship, like he said, umrah, whatever the case may be, it's not valid. Why? No intention. They don't have the ability to make the intention for the worship. What about the one after that, after the age of 7?
It's rewardable, but no sin if they don't.
It's rewardable, but it's no sin if they don't. As they're able to, it's considered after the age of 7, they're able to formulate the intention for whatever they get ready to do. Based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that he said, command your kids to pray at the age of 7. So the scholars say that before the age of 7, mentally they're not able to bring about the intention to really know what they're doing like that. After the age of 7, they're able to do that. So the child that is 8 or 9 years old, even though the salat is not obligatory on them, if they pray, then the salat will be valid from them, as they reach the age to be able to bring about a niyyah, an intention to understand what they're doing. Clear? If it's not clear, tell me now. The child under the age of 7, the child that's 5, 4, 3, there's no problem. We bring them to the masjid, we line them up, we get them used to what wudu is. But when they don't pray, y'all, it's not something we, snapping, we tripping on them, screaming at them like they reached the age of puberty. They're not even at the age of 7. The Prophet ﷺ said, command them to pray at the age of 7. We grabbing them, yanking on them because they won't stand still in the salat, and they 4. Right? Khata, that's a mistake. The hadith says, command them to pray at the age of 7. We bring to the masjid, we want them to pray, but what's going to happen when you line up a 4-year-old for tarawih? How long are you going to stand there or she going to stand there? 30 seconds, then run off. Right? They haven't even reached the age of 7 where we've been commanded to tell them to pray. So when they run off, it's not a big deal. It's nothing to lose it about. Clear? The two groups under the age of puberty, up to the age of 7 and then after the age of 7.
What if somebody young and they do like every part of the lot right?
They do?
Yeah.
They do what?
They get like
Every part of the salat
right,
correctly?
do it like better than somebody older.
Alhamdulillah.
Do they still not get a reward?
It depends. The people who get the reward are what? Start from what age do the people get the reward? After what? After 7. Before 7, there's no reward for them as they're not able to formulate a niyyah. Yes. Hold on, I'm sorry. Which doesn't mean, y'all, it don't mean that if your kid is 5 or 3 or 4, it doesn't mean you still shouldn't encourage them to do stuff. But when they don't do it, there are no repercussions for these children at that age. Clear? Even at 9, 8, it's not obligatory. Clear? The Prophet ﷺ said at the age of 10 is when you do what? What's the word used in the hadith? Beat them. That's a bad translation. It is, it's a bad translation. The word is thought of in Arabic, but what does that mean? How we understand, if we leave it like that, the Prophet ﷺ said, command your kids to pray at 7 and beat them at 10.
No, I was saying is like beat as in punish, not beat to hurt.
Good. Beat as in not hit to hurt them. It's not a hit of you're mad because they're not listening to what you told them to do, and you're supposed to be a Muslim, and they not even reached the age of puberty yet. It's not even obligatory on them. Everything at this point is in the learning stage. So when the 10-year-old doesn't pray, as the ulama explained, it's not a violent hit, a yank, get over here when we get home. It's not that. Allah understand. It's not that. And there shouldn't be anything to leave marks on them and all that kind of stuff. It's not even obligatory on them. So the hit, which comes in more than one place. The hit comes here in the Kitab al-Salat, and the hit also comes in the Kitab al-Nikah, the book of marriage. People think they can hit their wives. Men think they can hit their wives because the ayah says hit them. Come on, Islam agrees with a salim, a sound mind. Hitting a person is not for the sake of harming them. The hit is something as more like to bring attention. As it was explained to us when we went to university, the hit was a miswak that you clean your tooth with. How much damage is that going to do to a grown woman? The little stick that the beat or the siwak. Not literally ball your fist up and punch a woman in her face because she's being disobedient. Allah understand. That's not from the teaching of the Messenger. And beating your kids to the point where you're bruising them and breaking arms. Now you gotta go to the hospital and lie. That's not from Islam. It's not Islam.
And before 10, does the child have the decision to tell you, no, I don't want to pray? Before 10, from 7, like say they 8, and you say, come pray.
Right.
And they tell you, I don't feel like praying. You gotta chalk it, kinda. Is that correct? Because you can't punish them for not praying.
I'm gonna say this. If an 8-year-old tells you they don't feel like doing something, that's a bad relationship between the parent and the child. I'll say that. There's no way in the world an 8-year-old is telling their parents they don't feel like doing something. You done lost your mind.
See, but you can't punish them.
You done lost your mind. Now, that happens when, and this is a lot of our situation, maybe the child is that's not my child, that's her child, right? That's a child from another marriage, so young boy don't really want to listen to me, right? It might happen like that. If it happens like that, then that's a different situation. But I doubt it highly that a man and his son in his house from him is going to turn around and say to his father, I don't feel like that. I doubt it. If that's the case, it's still at that point, even according to the hadith, he's not even 10. So the hit doesn't even apply to him at this point.
As I said, you just got chalk it.
All right? At this point, even all of this time from 7, even the whole time, it's all a learning process. It's all a learning process, right? طيب. He says, after that, وَعَلَى وَلِيِّهِ أَمْرُهُ بِهَا لِسَبْعٍ وَضَرْبُهُ عَلَى تَرْكِهَا لِعَشْرٍ. At that point, for the parent, for the wali, the guardian of the child, it is on the wali, the guardian, the obligation at the age of 7. The obligation at the age of 7 is now on the parent to do what? Command them to pray. You don't wait until your child, your daughter, 14, 15. Now you want to tell her to start praying and put on the khimar. That's not, right? You wait till young boy get into high school and tell him to start praying. That's going to be difficult. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but it's going to be difficult to wait. All of that time is learning to groom them into understanding what is the salat. We do this every day, 5 times a day. Have to be wudu. It has to be time. It's a lot that they have to learn and remember in order to get it right. So all of that time, it becomes obligatory on the parent, the guardian, to command the child at 7 to pray. Let's go pray. What if they don't come down in time? You done finish praying, they still upstairs on the game. That's how I go. All right? You done finish praying dhuhr, they still upstairs on the game. Now what? And they 8 years old. How are we handling it?
You talk to them, but you can't punish them.
I want to know exactly what you want to do. What you going to do?
You keep saying you can't punish them.
Turn it
You
off.
can't beat them or you can't punish them.
When I took the beating thing in my mind, that because it's a beating punishment, I figure it as punishment. So it's like, I'm not gonna play the game of, all right, you didn't pray, and then when you ask me, oh, can I go outside? No, you can't go outside, because you ain't do this, that, and the third. But I know in my head it's because you didn't pray, but I'm gonna say it's something else. Cause then it's like, you feel me, you kinda getting into,
So he don't get in trouble for being disobedient. You just concentrating that he didn't pray and Allah not gonna punish him and it's not obligatory, but it's no, you understand what I'm saying?
yeah, that's what I was gonna say, that's
It's
what
no
I'm saying.
hitting. It's no hitting at this point,
Oh,
but that
so-
doesn't mean they can't be punished.
Oh, okay, that's what I was trying to get, that's what I was trying to
As a
get.
child.
As a child, that don't mean you can't give them other things, but the hitting, as it comes in the hadith, and the hit is not a hit. Not that it's a hit of pay attention.
Okay.
Yo, you 10, you still ain't praying? You 11, you're 12, it's not a hit of bruising and trying to hurt a kid. Islam doesn't accept that.
When you started talking, you just started talking about like ages and stuff. What if they nobody spent the time to teach them how to pray, and they reaching the age over puberty and stuff, will it still be sins?
From Tez. This is a question that how old are you?
9.
What's your name? Huh?
Who back?
This is a 9-year-old asking this question. What if the child is approaching puberty and their parents didn't teach them how to pray? Huh? Anthem. Sinful. The parents are sinful. The obligation on the parent is when they're at the age of 7, it's obligatory for the parents to start commanding the child to pray and teach. Not just say go pray, you got to teach them how to pray. The Prophet ﷺ said, all of you, kullukum, all of you are shepherds, and every shepherd is responsible for his or her flock. When the father is not there, when the man is not in the house, it's on the wife to pick up the slack. If the wife is not there, the husband got to pick up the slack. That's going to be the sin. At that point, it's going to be on the parents. If it's Muslim families, 3, 4 Muslim children in the house, and there's teenagers who don't know how to pray or make wudu, that sin is on the parent. Or the kid, as he's saying, they're approaching puberty and they still don't know how to make wudu, that sin is on the wali, the guardian. That's a different situation if you teach them and they're not listening. We're talking about the person who leaves it off and they don't teach them at all. طيب ويحرم تأخيرها إلى وقت الضرورة إلا ممن له الجمع بنيته ومشتغل بشرط لها يحصل قريبا. طيب. This situation has some is going to come around again, the details of it. That the yahram, the word used is haram. Haram. Now what does haram mean again? Islamically, haram means what? A who? Not harmful. It's a sin, and what else? Punishable. But Allah could punish you. For what? Yahrum ta'khir salat, delaying the salat. Not praying the salat in its proper time. Now, for example, let's just say this, for example, Salat al-Asr or Salat al-Dhuhr is from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the summer, right? Dhuhr runs from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. That you don't pray Dhuhr until 4:30, 5 o'clock, outside of its time. Every Salat has a specific time. That it is sinful to delay, don't pray the Salat in its correct time. Clear? Now there's some times which is going to come in more detail when we get to that chapter, the Awqat al-Salat, the times of the Salat. It'll be a little more detail connected to
I
that.
got a question, it's a little bit off topic, but it's on topic. So in reference to the hypocrites, when they say that one of the characteristics of the hypocrite is that they delay the salat, does it mean delaying it like you described, or delaying it to where it's close to going out of this window?
We're going to get to that. The question is for the hypocrites who, again,
The characteristics, they say
the characters of hypocrites,
are that they delay the salat.
that they delay the Salat.
Is it saying delay, like you say, where it's out of the window, or is it delayed to the end of the window? Because I know they said in, I think, a description of Asr, they delay Asr until it's close to the sun, and then they peck their head, or something like.
We're going to get into that when we get to Awqat al-Salat, because there's something connected to that, which is what the darura. I'm gonna leave it general here as far as the impermissibility of delaying the prayer outside of his time, except in two cases. Two cases, the permissibility of delaying the salat outside of his time. Does anybody know one? When can you delay dhuhr? Huh? Outside of its time.
When you, like you can't, right then, you can't leave it.
Or you can't what?
When you can't, pray right then, you can't do it.
One is travel.
Traveling. When you're traveling, you can delay. You can pray dhuhr right now is at 12:15. So that means I have from 12:15 or the time up here is 11:46, right? On the clock. So for example, I got from 11:46 to 2:24. All that's the time of dhuhr. But if I'm traveling, I don't have to pray dhuhr until Asr. I can wait. I can wait and pray those two prayers together. Clear? That's the first time. If a person has the intention to combine prayers, so you're traveling, you go to New York, you say, you know what, it's time for dhuhr, but we're going to delay dhuhr, right? We're going to pray dhuhr and Asr together when Asr comes in. Clear? That's the first time you can delay the salat outside of its time. That's a valid excuse. Every excuse, y'all, is not a valid excuse. Every excuse is not a valid excuse. All right? This is the first one. The second one, if the person is trying to complete a condition for the salat. For example, we cannot pray unless we do what? Make wudu. Let's just use wudu, right? So now, it's time to pray dhuhr. You come to the masjid, Allah protect us here. But sometimes in Mecca, you go to the masjid for the salat and there's no water. The water shut off. You go to the masjid, the water shut off. You go to the masjid, the water shut off. So you can't make wudu and you can't use the bathroom, right? So now what you want to do? Huh? La.
Why can't you?
La. Do you? Huh?
Use the like closest water source, like you have to go somewhere else.
Go look for some water, right? There's no water here. You don't just make tayammum and use dust. Go look for some water. You're looking for water. Dhuhr, Asr is at 2:24. It's 2 o'clock. You still ain't found any water yet. What you do? Huh? Keep looking for water. It's 2:20. Somebody says, you know what? The water at the masjid is back on. Go in the masjid. You go back in the masjid, right? You come back. Now it's 2:30. The salat went out. But you're sure that you can get to the water and it's close to 2:24. It's close to the event. That's the other time. When you're trying to get it and it's going to be close to the time you're supposed to pray. Clear? Not, for example, you're not going to be able to get to it until 4:30. You're not going to wait till 4:30 to pray dhuhr. Clear? You praying it a little bit after the next salat came in. Clear? But why did you delay it? You didn't have any water. You couldn't make wudu. And wudu is a condition for the salat. So you're not just delaying it I'm going to just delay it and pray it at 5. You're going to delay it if you know you're going to be able to get to it a little bit after that. Then you delay it a little bit in that case.
What if like there's like no water source on close, like the masjid doesn't have a like water thing? You have to pray without wudu, or you can't pray.
If there's no water? If there's no water?
Yeah.
If there's no water, you're going to do what first? Look. You're going to keep looking. Keep looking, keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. If it comes to the situation there's no water, that's when you're going to make tayammum with the dust.
It's like a drought.
If there's no water, that's when you're going to make tayammum with the dust. That's the first. All right, we don't just turn and use the tayammum, y'all. We have to search for water first. If we have to buy water, we buy water, as long as it's at a reasonable, normal price. As long as somebody, for example, somebody know the water in here is shut off, and then they go outside and they selling bottled waters for $10 a bottle. No, we don't have to buy that. But if you go outside and this bottle of water is sell for the normal price, $1, $1.50, $2, then you gotta buy that water to make wudu in order to fulfill the condition. طيب. The last issue, we're gonna stop here with jahiduha kafirun. That the person who denies the obligation of the salat, the person who denies the obligation of the salat is no longer a Muslim. The person who denies the obligation of the salat is not a Muslim. There is no Muslim except that every Muslim believes in how many pillars? 5. What's the second pillar? The salat. The most important pillar is the shahada, that a person becomes a Muslim, that they say the shahadatain. I bear witness none is right to be worshipped except Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. After that, the most important thing, the second pillar that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned is the salat. So every Muslim has to believe that the salat is obligatory. If there's a Muslim and they say, no, I don't believe the salat is obligatory, then this is something that affects a person's Islam with certain conditions. We're not talking about y'all, we're not talking about people, a new Muslim, and they really might not know. And this is not for everybody to go around looking and testing people and asking them and calling people who say you're a kafir, you ain't a Muslim. No. We apply this on ourselves. Clear? If there's a Muslim and they deny the obligation of the salat being obligatory, then this can take a person outside of Islam. Assuming that the person is not a new Muslim, because a new Muslim has an excuse. Does a new Muslim have an excuse? They don't know. They just took shahada. They don't know. So they get the other bil-jahl, the excuse of not knowing.
This was going back to like the puberty thing. My wife said, she said, as far as for the boys, how do you know when the boy has reached?
How do you know when a boy reaches puberty? Do we know? It's a good question. It's a couple different signs. And any one sign, any one of these signs, any one sign meaning that the boy has reached puberty. Brothers, that's a lot of men in here, huh?
Pubic hair.
Pubic hair, hair around the crotch. Yes, the crotch, the private part. Hair around the private area. Huh? Pubic hair, tell you. Hair around the private area. If it's hair around the private area, that means that the boy has reached puberty. That means now he has to pray or she has to pray. It's similar for the boys and the girls. If they have pubic hair, then they have to pray. What else?
Wet dreams for boys.
A wet dream. Nocturnal emission. A wet dream. It's a lot of kids. Who don't know? If you don't know what a wet dream is, raise your hand. Whoever you're here with, there's a couple boys. When we finish, you go to whoever you came with, and they got to explain to you what a wet dream is. Inshallah. Tayyib? No shot. Yeah, I think it's a question. What else? Either. Huh? Face bumps? That's a good one. But that's not a sign that a child has reached puberty. Face bumps. Facial hair? La. Good. The age of 15. That's the last one. Let's save that for last though. So right now we got a wet dream, nocturnal emission, and hair on the private area. Or leave 15 for last. We're missing one. Yeah, we already said nocturnal emission. The Adam's apple? La. Adam's apple, y'all, is not a sign that a person's reached puberty, not in Islam. Huh? Hair on the underarms, the armpit. Feet shake? It's sure. Huh? If none of those signs come up, say a boy, he's 14 years old, and he doesn't have any of those 3 signs. None of those things happen. Then some of the other men say at 15, definitely. If he reaches the age of 15, khalas, he's reached the age of puberty. Now for the girls, the women, right? They have a specific sign that only applies to them, which is what? Huh? The menses. If the girl gets her menses, then she's reached the age of puberty. Clear? The first question, can you elaborate on what mental instabilities remove you from the responsibility of the prayer? That's not really my call. That's a medical term. That's a person has to seek medical advice, right? Again, it could be times where a person is not stable and a person is stable. That's not the call of me, right? They could be on medication, they're fine. They're not on medication, they're not fine. That would be something that the doctors determine, not the imam of the masjid, not just this masjid. The imam of the masjid, unless he's a medical doctor. If he's a medical doctor, then alhamdulillah, or he's a mental health specialist, then maybe. But a general person, we don't determine if a person, doesn't have to pray or not. So no, he's just not there always. So, no. We need medical advice.
Even if we speak to a doctor or medical professional, how would they determine whether that person's fit for the salat? So
The doctor? Well, let's say this. When it comes to Islamic rulings, and it's not just for the salat, even during fasting, sometimes people got to get medical attention from doctors for fasting. That a person should try to seek that medical attention from a Muslim doctor, firstly, if they're able to. In the same situation here. Now the doctor, as we know, there are different levels of mental instabilities. Everybody's not on the same level. Some people, the case may be a little more severe than others. What I'm trying to say is not one blanket answer. You have to judge it case by case. It's a case by case situation. It's a case by case situation. I can't tell you just whoever does this, right? It's a case by case situation.
I just wanted to add, even though Islamically, you're looking for a ruling Islamically, a doctor can tell you this child won't go past the understanding of an 8-year-old.
Maybe.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Sometimes
Exactly.
it'd be like
They
that.
might tell you something like that. Now, if they say that and the child still picks up and they still pray and they still want to go make wudu, hey, that's good. You're not going to stop them and say, well, you don't have to pray anyway, sit down. No, if they want to stand and they want to pray next to you, alhamdulillah. That's khair. But what if they don't? You call them they don't come to the salah. You stand them up and they leave. It's not on them. So we got to be a little more, have a little more mercy with people in that situation. If a person abandons the salah, does that make them a disbeliever? That's an issue, and it's serious about not praying. The issue of not praying is not a joke. Tariq as-salat, there are books written on just that by itself, for the person who does not pray. Yes.
So
Hold on. That's another question?
Yeah.
Hold on. For the person who doesn't pray, it's not something that we should take lightly. Because there are many, even though the scholars differ on if the person is still, who wants to gamble with being raised on the day of judgment as a disbeliever? As the Prophet ﷺ said, it was between us and the disbelievers, them is the salat. So whoever doesn't pray, man tarakaha faqad kafar. Whoever leaves it off, they disbelieve. The ulama, they differ on what's understood by that hadith. But for us, each person listening, for me personally, is it worth you not praying? And then you got a hope on the day of judgment that you still fit under the fold of Islam? The ulama, the scholars of Islam have differed. If the person who doesn't pray, and it's going to come up again, so we'll deal with it in detail when it comes, inshallah. It's an issue of if the person who doesn't pray, if they're still Muslim or not. Many say no. Many of the scholars of Islam say no, the person who doesn't pray is not a Muslim anymore. That's not for us to start running around asking people if they praying and tell, oh, you don't pray? You ain't even Muslim. That's not what we're doing. We worried about, are you praying? That's all you should be worried about. Am I praying? Because if I'm not praying, I don't want to fall under that.
Another, like, there's something to add on that. If you, I was, Mufti said something about it. He basically said, if you want treat it like that, like you said, a lot of the scholars say that if you don't pray, so you have to be fair with it. So you can't say, oh, my brother that don't pray is cool, I'm gonna greet him, give him salams, praise and answer, but the boy from across the street that don't pray,
Right.
I ain't greeting you back,
Right.
I ain't, you feel me?
So it's gonna be a
that
whole
was
lot
something you
connected
mentioned
to
on
it.
that topic, like you have to be fair with it. If
Jay.
you believe that if somebody that doesn't pray is a Muslim, you have to be fair.
We gotta be careful, y'all. We make sure we apply stuff to us. Make sure we're praying. We shouldn't be worried about, honestly, we shouldn't be worried about anybody else except ourselves. And those that we're responsible for in our family that's close to us.
So you under 10 years old, right? As signs of puberty, is it wiser for them to pray, or do you beat them at 10 if they don't pray?
The youth under 10, if you're under, the youth under 10, it's not obligatory on them to pray. When does it become obligatory for a person to pray? Puberty. If they're under 10, it's not obligatory.
But I think another thing for this year, I don't know if you mentioned it, but Allah said that, commanded them to pray, that command.
There you go.
So parents are negligent, we're simple or not.
Yeah, we spoke about that. The command for the wali's on the wali, the guardian. The children under 10 is not obligatory for them to pray. Meaning, it's not punishable. It's no sin on them. When they reach the age of 10, they still haven't reached the age of puberty. The hitting is not a hit to hurt them. The hit is a hit of encouragement, tadib, attention, bring attention to the seriousness of the situation. Hold on, Sheikh, because they had another question on it. How long do you delay before tayammum? Tayammum should be the last option. We did the chapter of tayammum. We did the chapter of tayammum already. When there is no water, if the salat comes in at 1 o'clock, you come to the masjid and there's no water, right? You don't just make tayammum. You look for water. You want to look for water first. That means you look around. Maybe it's fresh bottled water in the masjid you have to use. Maybe you got to go next door to Family Dollar and buy a bottle of water. Tayammum is the last result. Tayammum is using the dust to make wudu when there is no water. And you use the dirt to make wudu because there's no water. That's the last option. It's not like you got, the salat comes in at 11:46 for Dhuhr. Asr is not until 2:24. You got over 2 hours to find some water. Right? You don't just turn around, oh man, the water shut off. Well, let's just do this. No. You go get water. If you get water, the last option comes, you're not able to get the water, then that's a different situation. I'm sorry,
when you was talking about on the day of judgment, what if it's the day of judgment and you're not Muslim, like you're Christian and you're Christian?
What if?
Yeah.
You said, what if it comes? Is that the question?
What if it comes
Yeah,
like
what's
you're
gonna
not
happen
Muslim?
to the Quran?
Oh man, that's a whole class. That's a whole class. It's a lot. It's a lot of things are gonna happen, man. It's a lot of things are gonna happen the day of judgment. And it's important that we know the chain of events and what's gonna happen, as Allah told us in the Quran, that we find the Son of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We should know, and we should know what's, the signs of the day of judgment. As many of the signs of the day of judgment have already happened. A lot of the signs that the day of judgment is coming already happened.
One of the things, Sheikh, if you can, to clarify is that when you talk about at the age of 10, the child has to pray, beat the child, such as remind them. I want you to clarify that should be in connection with the child who has been taught to pray and instill that prayer in them. Not when a child turns 10, you gotta pray.
Right.
And the child don't have no type of connection to the prayer physically or otherwise.
Well, that's from the wali. That's from the wali. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, what? At the age of what? 7. Who was that Who is that command directed to in the hadith? The parents. The command is to the parents at the age of 7 that you command your children to do something. If you don't do that as the parent, that means you are the sinful one, not the child. So when the child turns 10, don't turn around and try to start acting crazy now because you didn't do your job for the past 3 years, basically. Which doesn't mean you can't command the child at 5. Come on, let's pray. It's time to pray. Let's go. In order to get them used to it. But if a person waits till 7, and then they still at 8, 9, 10. Now at 10, you want to just go to beating. You didn't even follow. Don't use half of the hadith. Use the whole hadith. The hadith is at the age of 7, command them. And even if the hitting is not a hit because you're mad now, because now you're embarrassed, because your son or your daughter with the Muslim name, right? You go somewhere and they embarrass you. So now since you're embarrassed, right? You want to take your anger out on them and talking about the hadith, so you hit them at 10.
So I got a question on, so say for instance you're a new shahada, right? You're a parent.
The parent is a new shahada.
Parent is a new shahada. Child is 9 years old. Right? The parent is just learning the Salat.
Right.
Both parents just learning the Salat and everything. Child 10. Now what?
The parent is just learning the Salat, and the child is 10. So I'm assuming that the child wasn't taught.
Right. Because the parents didn't know.
Parents didn't know. What y'all think?
Gradual growth.
Huh?
The best you can do. Gradual growth, the best you can do.
Again?
Gradual growth.
Oh, gradual growth.
Best you can do.
J. Does it make sense, Aklan, for a person to be held accountable for something that they didn't know? That's why Islam has what is called the excuse for a person not knowing. As long as they fit the description like this, if they could actually not know. We ain't talking about a person walking around, they 3, 4 generations living with Muslims, their grandmother, grandfather, mother, then they turn around and say, oh, I didn't know we had to pray 5 times a day. They're not talking about that, but the person, the parent is Muslim, the child is Muslim, they reach the age of 10, inshallah, they will have an excuse. They don't need to beat the child. At that point, you're going to be beating them for something that they didn't know in the first place. The window of what? Of not being, of not knowing? That's another good question. Let me ask y'all something. I just want to know. Do you think, this is for us here in Philly, do you think a Muslim in Philadelphia, a new shahada, let's say for 1 year, a new shahada, a year is new, right? Do you think a new shahada, man or woman in Philadelphia, has an excuse before Allah for not knowing how to pray? In Philadelphia? What you mean by know how to pray? What you mean by that? What does that have to do with it? A new shot? Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. When I say they don't know how to pray, right? I'm talking about don't know how to pray. I'm not talking about itqan and certain things. They don't know how to pray. Maybe the people that taught them Al-Fatiha, that was the best they knew. Allah, I don't know about that. I'm just saying, a person, they learn Al-Fatiha, whoever taught it to them, they taught it to them the best they could teach it to them. Come on, shit. Cut your coon. It could be, actually, if they're the only people there.
I got a question that what brothers asked about the new shahada. It's kind of related. Now, I find it's kind of common. A lot of Muslims take shahada, their children they're under the age of puberty. They don't ever enforce Islam upon them. I mean, they don't teach about Islam. Say the child got a choice. They don't have to be Muslim. They still celebrate Christmas. I'm not going to change them. I'm going to let them make that choice. Is that permissible? If they're under puberty. I'm not talking about a child who's at puberty because at that point in time, he's responsible for himself or herself. But I'm talking about someone who's under puberty, the parents accepted Islam. They know. They start studying and learning, but they don't force Islam upon their children.
a parent takes Shahada, becomes a Muslim, and they allow their children, for example, to keep celebrating Christmas.
Just be careful in general.
Or just, they allow their children, 7, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, to continue being non-Muslims.
Sometimes they know, I done ran into people that been close for 5 years and they still, the kids becoming grown or puberty at that age, they still not practicing.
And they never command
They never
them
command them
to,
pray or do anything. Is that permissible?
is that permissible?
Permissible, but they still in the puberty. That's always been my understanding, that if you accept Islam, your children are under puberty, they Muslim too.
Yeah, that's rough, man. Allahu A'lam, but I'll say this. That's dangerous for the parent. I'll just say that much. That's dangerous for the parent. That you know the truth, and you know that the people who don't believe what you believe, and you don't save, as Allah said in the Quran, save yourself and your family, that you allow your children to continue to disbelieve in Allah. You don't teach them, you don't call them to. And those people, the children and the family, those are the people who have the most right to be called to Al-Islam. By all of us, that our family members have the most right to be called to Al-Islam. That a parent becomes a Muslim, they have a child of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and they don't call them and teach them about Islam. They allow them to continue committing shirk and disbelieving and praying to other than Allah. That's difficult. That's a dangerous situation for the parent. The child, of course, is excused, not even reached the age of puberty, right? As the Prophet ﷺ said, the pen is lifted from the child until they reach the age of puberty. So the child is excused. The parent, is it, that's difficult. I say at the least it's dangerous. At the least, that's a dangerous situation.
What about the parent that does take Shahada, but then the kid has the other parent in his ear, preaches something different?
That's another situation.
They get funky.
I mean, this is a real situation. We gotta remember is we living in the area, our situation is our situation. And some kids, they stay with their parent, their mother, and then they stay with the father. And one of them might be a Muslim and the other one is not a Muslim. The reality is you have to do your job. We don't control what goes on in the other house. That's just the reality. You don't have the ability, you don't have the authority to go into another person's house and command. Like, when they come to your house, you have to uphold Islam in your house. Is it difficult? I'm sure it's difficult. It's difficult. It's not easy. But at the same time, the reality is the authority of another person's home, we don't have that. And if you violate the authority of another person's home, they might call the cops on you and make the situation worse. So the reality is we have to make sure we do what we're supposed to do. When they're with us, if they're at your home, then you practice Islam. Now this is the situation because the child is 8. You tell him to come pray or you tell her to come pray and she's 8 and she doesn't come to pray. Right? I mean, Islamically, according to what we talk about, really, does she have to come pray? Or him? Of course, we want him to come pray, but is it obligatory at that point? It's not. But that doesn't mean we shut them off and say, man, I'm going to just down and come over here no more. If the other parent is not Muslim and you don't let them come there, when are they going to see people praying? Never. Right, whether they pray or not. The wali, the guardian, the parents have to command the kids to pray, right? At what age? What if they don't pray at 7? What if they don't come? You did your job. What if you call them at 8? At 9? At 10?
Nope.
What
Now what?
if
Of course, we're not trying to hurt nobody. Islam doesn't.
you're like born Muslim, but like the guardian you have, like doesn't know like any Islamic stuff, or and like if you tell them or hear that you have to pray, they don't know what you're talking about or what you're doing.
Who, the guardian? You're Muslim, the child is Muslim, and the parent doesn't know about the prayer.
I'm talking about the guardian.
the guardian, they don't know that you have to pray?
They don't know what he talking, they don't know what prayer is.
Or the other city, they not knowledgeable about prayer, times, conditions, like that type stuff, like.
Gee, this is a good question because for the parents, that's on us. We gotta understand, the Prophet ﷺ said that the children are excused until they reach the age of puberty. The sin is not gonna be on them. That's why if the parents not teaching, if the parents are not commanding, that sin is on us. If we don't know, if I don't know what to do, it's my job to put my children in a situation where they can learn it. So you don't know, you don't teach them, you don't put them around nobody that can teach them. Whose fault is that? When they turn around at 15 and now they ask you questions, you still can't answer them, and now they talking, whose fault is that? The parents. They're of age, they're under our responsibility. The Prophet said, we're responsible for our flock. Save yourselves and your family. First thing you're going to be asked about Yom Kippur from your actions is the Salat. The parent doesn't know. Tayyib. The parent doesn't know, fine. Which means they can't teach the children. So now what? The parents don't know and the child doesn't know and nobody makes an effort to learn anything? That sin is going to be on the parent. If there's no effort to learn, that sin is going to be on the parent. Allahu A'lam. If there's no more questions, we'll stop there. Inshallah. We'll continue next week, inshallah. Saturday? Sunday. The Sunday is the mentoring program for the boys this Sunday, inshallah, after Isha.
The team formal. It's Saturday.
Yeah, no.
I said Saturday.
Team formal this Saturday? No, it's closed already.
Oh, it's closed?
It's closed, inshallah. The boys mentoring this Sunday, inshallah, after Isha. Wa sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, Muhammad.